I've just come out with a new book called The Clinton UFO Storybook, ET Politics in the White House. And the reason I wrote it was because of very recent statements by Hillary Clinton in the 2016 campaign stating that if she becomes president, she intends to release what she can other than stuff that's national security. I'd worked on the presidents for probably 30 years, and I'd actually given up. I'd actually given away all the documents, the famous Rockefeller Initiative documents that I got. I'd given them all away. They're in a safe in Utah, and I figured the president knows, but he's never going to tell you, so there's a waste of time. And I had gotten into consciousness. So I was working on the consciousness thing, and suddenly, first of all, John Podesta makes a statement, a tweet in February of 2015. And I've known about John Podesta's interest. He's always been known as the X-Files guy in the Clinton White House. He was known as the X-Files guy. On his 50th birthday, Bill and Hillary Clinton hosted a 50th birthday party for him in the White House. And it was an X-Files theme, and Bill and Hillary dressed up like the X-Files. So he's had this interest, and I know in the Barack Obama administration that he was pushing openness in government. I knew John Podesta was big into open government. So when John Podesta in February of 2015 came up with this now famous tweet, he says in the tweet, he says, "Once again, my biggest disappointment of 2014 was not getting the disclosure of the UFO documents." The key things to this whole thing is, and I say, when you see John Podesta, you have to read it like 5 times, then take a week, then read it 5 times again, because he's very carefully how he brings, he doesn't tweet very much, he doesn't talk. He says, I believe in the cult of non-personality. He stays out of the limelight, he pulls strings from behind. So when he put this, the significant things was, he says, once again, which means before Obama, he tried, because he was only in Obama's administration for 1 year, he tried to get it out. He tried to get Bill and Hillary Clinton, or Bill to release this stuff. And he did get Bill to release an awful lot of material. For example, 1994, Bill Clinton, with one stroke of a pen, with an executive order, declassified 15% of all the material in the National Archives. All World War II records were declassified in one stroke of a pen. In 1995, and I'm sure John Podesta was part of this as well, he did a famous executive order that said anything that's over 25 years, if it's classified, it has to be declassified unless you fall under one of 6 exemptions to keep this thing classified. Otherwise, it has to be declassified. That executive order, with one stroke of a pen from an executive order, declassified over 1 billion pages of material. In 1996, Bill Clinton declassified all the Corona material, all the satellite photograph stuff. So there was a lot of disclosure going on in the Bill Clinton administration, and John Podesta was part of this. When Barack Obama takes office, John Podesta helps set up his cabinet and appoint the people for his government. 40 people in John Podesta's institute. John Podesta is the guy who founded the #1 Democratic think tank, the Center for American Progress in Washington. 40 people from that think tank are in the Obama administration. So Podesta is a very, very powerful guy. He's got these influences, and he gets Barack Obama to have these open government statements when he first comes in, which really don't come to any fruition. But John goes back, so when he makes this tweet, at the day before he leaves the Obama administration, he says, once again, which means I tried to talk to Bill, Bill wouldn't go for it. He says, my biggest disappointment was not getting the disclosure. So he talked to Obama. And Tom DeLonge, who is a musician, who is now claiming that he's got inside sources, one of them being John Podesta, is being given material to disclose to the people. Now, he said that Podesta told him that he had talked to Obama about UFOs, about disclosing UFOs. So Obama and Clinton, for whatever reason, decided no, they didn't want to do it. They couldn't do it for whatever reason. So when the Hillary Clinton thing starts, you take this tweet, and then you see the big action starts in October of last year. She's doing an interview with Lena Dunham, I think it was. And again, Podesta tweets, and he doesn't tweet very much on this stuff. He tweets and he says, good interview, Lena. Next time, ask her about the aliens, which means he's pushing the issue. And the key to that is, this is a $1 billion campaign. John Podesta is the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign. He is, according to all the reports, he has first and last word on everything that happens in the campaign. He is at present helping to appoint the vice president to Hillary Clinton. He's very, very powerful. He controls Hillary. He keeps her out of trouble. He's the guy that got Bill Clinton out of the Monica Lewinsky mess. That was his job, to clean up all that scandal in the Clinton administration. So when he says, Lena, good interview, next time ask her about the aliens, he's pulled it. Steve Bassett will disagree with me. I say no, he has to have pulled it, because this is a $1 billion campaign. And if she suddenly dropped 20 points in the poll, everybody would look at John and say, you stupid idiot, what did you do that for? So that's the way campaigns work. When you're running a presidential campaign, you're not interested in the Democrats or the Republicans. All you're interested in is swing states and swing voters. And that's why, to give you an example, in 1995, Bill Clinton goes to the Rockefeller Ranch. And this is where this briefing thing takes place. The only reason he went to the Rockefeller Ranch was not to listen to UFOs, because he wasn't even in the briefing, was because Dick Morris, who was his campaign manager in 1995, Bill Clinton was down in the polls against Dole, and he said the swing voters are people who are into the ecology, they're into camping, and they're into fishing, and you got to do a trip to Wyoming and go fishing and camping and stuff. And Bill, according to Dick Morris, said he was phoning him from the ranch, and he said he had to hold the phone a foot from his ear because Bill was screaming, "Get me the hell out of here! Well, I hate it. I can't stand being here." And stuff like that. He didn't want to be there, but because the swing voters he needed to appeal to the swing voters. So when you have John Podesta put out this tweet, what they have done is they have used focus groups, which they do for everything in the campaign. They put it in front of a focus group and they see how does it play. In 2008, Dennis Kucinich was asked the question. He had this UFO sighting at Shirley MacLaine's house with Shirley MacLaine's bodyguard and the bodyguard's girlfriend. And Shirley MacLaine wasn't there, but Shirley MacLaine put this in her book and said that he had had a sighting, and the sighting was 50 yards away over the swimming pool, and that he had heard voices. So in the campaign, when Dennis Kucinich is running for president for the Democrats, he's asked in this famous Democratic debate, did you see a UFO and did you hear voices? And he said, everybody's seen UFOs, and no, I didn't hear voices. His campaign was over. So it was a toxic issue then, and we've always believed it was a toxic issue. When I saw John Podesta say, ask Hillary about the aliens, I knew that this was he pulled it and it's no longer a toxic issue.
You believe that Podesta's push for the UFO topic and disclosure with Hillary Clinton is for votes?
In a way it's for votes, but I think it goes deeper than that. If you know John Podesta has two big interests. One is the ecology. He's big on global warming. He's made a number of speeches, but his main interest in life is open government. He's made a number of speeches. The one that I always recommend people look at, he did a secrecy on security and secrecy at Princeton University. And he goes through the whole history of secrecy. He's been on a number of House committees on secrecy. He's the big on open government. He basically is what's called a Madison man. James Madison, the former president of the United States, talked about this idea that you cannot have a democracy. You cannot run a country unless the people know what's going on. And so John Podesta even frames this. He says, your vote is totally meaningless. Unless you know what the government's doing, it's totally meaningless. So what I think the main interest of Podesta is this idea that the people need to know what's going on. And he's done it not just on UFOs, he did it on the drones. He actually wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post challenging Obama to release the material on the drones. He said in the op-ed piece, he said, we've killed 4 Americans. The people need to know what's going on here. You should release these files. So he's big on the open government. I think also John Podesta, for whatever reason, he may be an experiencer because he's so heavily into the environment. For some reason, he's obsessed with the UFO subject. He's always been obsessed. So it may be just his way of getting this out, that he's tried to get it out for now 20 years. And this is his way, and I call it the Podesta box. He's built a box. A very smart guy. I think he's the smartest guy in the room. He's the smartest Democrat. He's the most powerful Democrat. He's built a box that the government can't get out. Because what the government's position is you can't have the president go down. The president has to be protected at all costs. So what you have is you have a situation like with the Iran-Contra, where somebody down below the president takes the rap. So Oliver North resigns. And the example I use is the Roswell thing. He's trying to force the Air Force to disclose the Roswell case in the 1990s. And he makes this statement after the first report. it comes out and it says, no, there was nothing there. It was just a mogul balloon. And Clinton challenges them at a speech in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And he says, if they did recover bodies, they didn't tell me about it either, and I want to know. So he's challenging them to explain the bodies. Then they come out in 1997 with this report that says, oh, it was crash test dummies that we dropped in 1953 with Air Force uniforms on and all this kind of stuff. And he has to give up. So what would have happened in that position if they had disclosed, if they had said, yes, we did a recovery, then what happens is you save the president. It doesn't have the president's fingerprints. The Air Force says, yes, they covered this thing up. The head of the Air Force resigns and the president is protected. So that's what I think they're trying to do, is they're trying to force a way that somebody discloses and you protect the president. Because if the president has to make the disclosure, then the president goes down and the country goes down because they no longer have a president. So John has built this box that I don't think they can get out. And what he did is he said on an interview he did with KLS TV in Las Vegas, he said, I think I've convinced her, which indicated to me again that he tried to convince Bill Clinton and he tried to convince Barack Obama and he couldn't. And what she has to do is sit down with the material and weigh it against national security and release what she can, which indicates to me there is no black cabal, there is no Illuminati running this thing. It's not the Wizard of Oz, it's the President of the United States. She will have the documents in front of him, according to John Podesta, and she's to look at it and make whatever decision she can and release as much as she can. So I thought he'd put her in the box. I thought he'd set this up. And then I'm thinking, well, why would he set up Hillary Clinton to do this? And what it seemed to come down to, from the reaction of what happened, first of all, there was no bad reaction. She didn't drop in the polls. Trump didn't go after her. Sanders didn't go after her because this issue, which verified the fact that he had pulled it and it's not a toxic.
Anybody could have turned on her and said, well, she's worried about UFOs up in space. I'm worried about jobs. They could have turned that around and buried her with it.
Yeah.
For me, it seemed like too big a gamble. Why was that done?
That's why I'm saying, Steve says he just did it because he was under pressure from Steve Bassett. I say no, because right now, Hillary, if you look at the investigation on Hillary, and this is just for improper handling of classified material, she has 147 FBI agents on this case for criminal investigation. They cannot, even if John Podesta and Hillary know what's going on, you cannot release classified information. You're going to be under an investigation and you're going to go to jail. So what they're doing, it's not a toxic issue because they pulled it. She didn't go down in the polls, which backs up my statement that he pulled this, that he realized this wasn't going to backfire, but he's indirectly taking the rap for it. Because if you ever hear Hillary talk about it, Hillary has not brought up the subject. People think Hillary's doing it for votes, whatever. Hillary has never brought up the subject. She has only answered 3 questions. One was from the newspaper in New Hampshire, one was from Jimmy Kimmel, and one was from this Breakfast Club radio show in New York City. Otherwise, it's John Podesta that keeps bringing it up. And she just says, I promised John I would do it, and I'm in favor of it because I'm in favor of open government. So it's this fall guy thing that John Podesta is the fall guy. It's not Hillary. So Hillary just says, it's John's idea and I'm just going along with it. And it's John's interest in the subject. It's not me that's going to do it. So they've worked this way. And then what I think happened was, I thought he'd put Hillary in the box, and I'm figuring, why would he do this to Hillary? But what has happened is, you see what happened may have been intended was that newspapers started picking it up. When the New Hampshire paper did, it went viral around the world. The reporter told me that the editor told him, go and talk to the rest of the reporters. We want more of this. Because it was so big a story that they suddenly became this famous newspaper in New Hampshire. And then he asked all the other people except for Trump. And you have that going on. And then you have John setting up other newspapers, encouraging other people to do it, and the questions start coming, and suddenly the New York Times on May the 10th does the story. This is when it really goes viral. This is when suddenly the major news media suddenly realize we've been had. There may be a story here. You see the interview with John Podesta on CNN. Tapper is asking him, he's saying, are there extraterrestrials coming to the Earth? And he stonewalls him. He says, I'll just tell you there's lots of planets out there. So he can't talk about classified material, but he's keeping the story going. He's keeping the story rolling. And then what happens is, once the New York Times does the story, it goes viral, and in a very important manner, the major news media suddenly realize there's a story here. And you get 3 questions. May the 11th, there was 2 questions asked to the White House press secretary. May the 16th, there was 1 question asked to the White House press secretary. Before that, there had not been a question asked to the White House press secretary about the UFO subject since 1997. And that was when Webster Hubbell came out with his book, Friends in High Places, and talked about Bill Clinton sending him to look out for UFOs. Before then, the question asked to the White House to Eisenhower was in January of 1954. He was asked a question on UFOs, and he walked around it. But the idea is that this is not a question that the White House press corps wants to touch. In fact, the woman that asked the question in 1997, Deborah Orrin from the New York Post, said, I asked the first question, he walked around it. I asked the second question, he walked around it. And then I waited for the rest of the White House press corps to follow up. And they all rolled over and played dead because they were afraid of their clearance being accepted in the White House. So it's a toxic issue. And suddenly they start asking questions. And the three people that asked questions were not little green men questions. They were serious questions. This one guy, I think it was from ABC, says, this is of interest to the people. Is Barack Obama going to beat Hillary to the punch on this? Is he going to disclose? And the only reason it saved the White House from disclosure was that the president wasn't asked the question. The question was asked of the press secretary. And he said, I don't have a tab in my book for that. He said, I don't have access to that kind of material. But then he rats out the president. He says, but Barack Obama has jokingly said that his job gives him access to this kind of material. You should ask him. It should be interesting. And I couldn't believe it. And so there's actually encouraging the reporters to ask Obama this question. And you can see from the tone of the interviews, especially the third one, Diane, she's an African-American reporter, she asked the Roswell question. She says, what about Roswell? Is this national security? Is this for real? And the press secretary gets a glass of water, and he starts drinking a glass of water. And she attacks him. She says, look, you're doing the dance. You're doing the dance at the podium. Look, you're getting a glass of water. You're trying to figure out what you're going to say. Is this for real? What's going on? And he again says, I'm not cleared to know this. And she says to him, and this is when you can tell, the attitude of the major media has changed. She says, you're not going to get away with this. And he said, you just keep trying. So all that saved them was that Barack Obama was in Japan. That if Barack Obama had faced those questions, if the president hesitates and says he was briefed or whatever, the thing starts to roll. And that's all you need is the one question. So this is what I think John had actually set up. He was setting up Obama. He was not setting up Clinton. But it's just a matter of time because I have these two reporters, and what I'm trying to impress on these reporters is ask the briefing question. Don't ask, are you interested in UFOs? Something he can make a joke about and walk around. Ask him the serious question, were you briefed on the UFO subject? So I think this is what John Podesta is doing. He's setting up this box that the government can't get out. And we're in a box already. So if Hillary does make it, if they don't ask the question between now and the time that Hillary's elected, Hillary's in a box. The only thing that will get her out of the box is if she reveals and says, I looked and there was nothing there. But if she comes, like she's talked about the national security thing, and she actually said in one of her statements, she said, if I can get agreement, which again indicates there is no black cabal, there's no Illuminati, it's not David Rockefeller and his buddies from Europe that are running the show. She said, if I can get agreement, which means that there's a group inside the White House that will discuss this, that have clearance to know about this subject. If I can get agreement, I will release what I can.
Let's say she does disclose it, or Obama discloses it. To whose advantage is that? Then what?
You might as well do it sooner rather than later because you're eventually going to have to do it. And there may be pressure coming from, like Steve Bassett believes the pressure that he's putting on these people is immense, that they're being forced to do it, which may have part of it. It may be the polling issue that they realize that now, as I said, John Podesta had to uphold this issue. It's no longer a toxic issue, and they think that the downside is going to be less now because the people are going to accept it, whereas 15 years ago or 20 years ago, you would have had a lot more negative reaction. And so I think that what they're trying to do is they're trying to get an outside agency so you can get an outside agency take the rap for it, almost like what happened in 1996. If you remember, Bill Clinton gets the NASA, the Mars meteorite. So they may discover the Mars meteorite, and you would assume that NASA would make the announcement. No, Bill Clinton was big into UFOs, and this was his opportunity. Bill Clinton actually takes the story, he goes and he does the news conference. We've got this thing, and it may be extraterrestrial life, and they're jumping on anything they can to get an outside person to make the confirmation, and not the government. So they jump on these kind of things, and I think I was told there really isn't a plan, that they're still trying to figure out what it was. But when I see what John Podesta is doing, I can see that he's almost done it. He's almost forced the issue out, that he doesn't really care. He just says you need open government, and you cannot run a democracy unless the people know what's going on. You cannot be voting unless you know what's going on. And to him, it's a basic issue. And because he's been chief of staff, he sees the presidential daily briefing. So he would have some knowledge of what's going on. If there's a UFO briefing, it has to go through his office to get to the president. He runs the briefing, stuff like that. So he would have some idea of what's going on. And I think it still comes down to polling, that they figure the time is right, we can do it, and they're just trying to figure out how exactly they're going to do it.
Let's say this does happen in the next months to year or two. What then?
To me, I think there's going to be a lot of repercussions, but I think science is going to be the worst because there's going to be two disclosures to me. The number one disclosure is going to be, yeah, ETs are coming here, or however they want to define it. And the second question is going to be, how the hell did they get here? Because the number one argument by science is you can't get here from there. Space is too big, all this kind of stuff. And then you get into the consciousness thing, because that's how they get here. They're not flying through time and space. So then you get into the whole thing about, is reality what we think it is? Is it really a nuts and bolts world, or is it a world worked by consciousness? And 14% of all experiencers, according to the Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation survey, 2,200 experiencers, show that 14% of them claim they've been allowed to fly the craft, and it's flown with the mind. So when you get into the aspect of disclosure, in the second disclosure, when it comes to the consciousness, how they get here through oneness. The story, the question was asked of Ben Rich, who ran Lockheed Skunk Works, who's supposed to do all the back engineering. When he was asked, how do they get here? How does the propulsion system work? He answered, what do you know about ESP? And the guy who asked the question said, it means everything in time and space is connected. And he said, that's how it works. And what happens is, in the second disclosure, the physical world will fall apart. We will realize it's not a physical world. It's got to do with consciousness and all this kind of stuff. And that's where you're going to see science really take the hit on this thing, because they have maintained it's a meaningless, random universe. You're biological robots. Consciousness is an illusion. There is no ESP. There's no paranormal phenomena. And suddenly, I mean, they're going to be lining up to jump off the bridge, because everything they've believed their whole life is going to be proved wrong when you suddenly get into the aspect of how did they get here. Is the whole idea about how many people that have been polled, who have been inside the craft, who interacted, talk about near-death experiences, reincarnation, ESP, ghosts, all this kind of stuff. And it's unbelievable amounts of material. Or serious questions. 42% of all experiencers are getting downloads, are getting mathematical, scientific material downloaded into their heads by these alien people. 40% of all experiencers have claimed that during their experience, at one time during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. This kind of stuff is absolutely revolutionary, and is stuff that science has denied backwards and forwards, in this almost like a Vatican-type cover-up, where you're not allowed to talk about these things, or otherwise you're going to lose your funding, you're going to lose your tenure, all this kind of stuff. That's where I think the real thing is going to start to unravel, which is, to me, is fantastic. But there will be a downside. It'll be, the stock market is going to take a hit. There's going to be lots of discomfort. But whether we do it today or we do it 10 years down the road, and that may be figured into their thing, that it may be worse to do it down the road. I'm not sure what the reasoning is. I'm just sort of think I know why Podesta's doing it, why he's pushing this issue and trying to force it out.